Welcome to the 2023 Oscar preview show as presented by the Yay, Nay or Meh channel. This is a series of videos where I will be analysing the above-the-line categories at the 2023 Oscars. Even though I've been podcasting and reviewing films for over a decade now, I still consider myself an enthusiastic amateur rather than an expert. I didn't go to film school, I don't really have the training in it. This is the reason why I only do the major categories, because I honestly don't think I can give a value judgment as to what the best editing is, what the best production design is. But I do believe I can give value judgments about the best acting, the best directing, the best writing, and the best film. So that is why I only do the major categories. And I analyse the Oscars in a slightly different way than most people, because I spend almost as much time discussing what I think should have been nominated rather than what was nominated, and only limiting myself to that. And as such, these videos and in past years audio podcasts do get rather long. So what I've decided to do is split these reviews up into separate videos, and there will be one video for each category, where I will be discussing what I think will win, what I think should win, whether there were any snubs, and if there were any snubs, whether I personally think they should actually have won the Oscar. And in a couple of places I've gone really left field with what I think should win the Oscar. So this is going to be a long process. I mean, at the time of recording, it's less than a week away from the actual Oscar ceremony. So I need to be efficient and I need to be fast. And as such, I'm going to be reusing a lot of the same videos. This introduction I'm recording now will be on each of these videos. I mean, I need to introduce each of the videos in case you come across them individually. So I may as well just record one introduction and use it in each of the videos. And if you watch more than one of these, you'll be seeing this a lot. And as such, there will be a time code in the comments to tell you when the actual content starts. And when I will be talking about the same film in different categories, I'll also be reusing that video as well. So you will be seeing some repeats, but again, you can check in the time codes. And with such a vast project, you need a starting point. In certain categories, there is a shortlist. In both the documentary feature and the international feature categories, the Academy publishes a 15-film longlist. And in the animated feature category, they publish a list of eligible films. And this year, there were 27 eligible animated features. But other than those categories with a specific list, the starting point that I use is the lists that are published on goldderby.com, which is basically the industry standard for this kind of Oscar preview and prediction. So if a performance or a film was listed on the Gold Derby lists of Oscar potential, there was a chance, however remote, that a performance or a film did have a chance at the Oscars. And that is the list I will be using, with a couple of tweaks which will come up during some of these videos. So that is my starting point, and if it wasn't published on goldderby.com, it's not going to be under consideration. And this has already gone on for far too long, so let's get on with this categories analysis. As I've been saying in that introduction that I've been using for all these videos, the only films under consideration in this category are the films that were on the 15-film longlist for the International Feature Oscar. But before I get to them and give a proper analysis of the category, I do want to give a shout out to some of the films who were not on that list. The way this category works is that each country and territory around the world has the opportunity to submit one film to the Academy, and from that list, this year there were 93 films on that list. But from that list, the Academy, or a committee of the Academy, selects the 15 film long list, and from that 15 film long list, the Academy at large votes. So with this system, there are easily ways which films slip through the cracks. Because it's one film, one country, sometimes countries submit the wrong film, or at least they submit a film that wasn't the one with the highest profile, wasn't the one that everybody expected them to. And sometimes it's just inexplicable. I mean, why did you do that? I mean, that it was right there. You didn't do it. Sometimes they just don't do what you expect. I mean, the most obvious example this year is India did not submit RRR, which got huge attention, huge profile. I think it was one of those films that everybody watched on Netflix during COVID, and people loved it. But India did not submit it. It has to be said, the film they did submit, The Last Film Show, did make it onto the 15 film long list, and honestly, I didn't think The Last Film Show was very good. It's kind of one of those filmmaker as a young man kind of autobiographical films, and meh. So RRR was not submitted. And other countries did similar things. Norway was largely expected, I think, to submit a film called Sick of Myself. A very, very cynical, very, very awkward comedy. One of those cringe-inducing films which has a very specific type of humour. But instead, Norway submitted a film called War Sailor, which is apparently the most expensive film that Norway has ever produced. And then we have situations where the most obvious film for a country to submit is unlikely to succeed simply because it's a genre film. It's a horror film. I largely expected the United Kingdom, my native land, to submit a Welsh language horror film called The Feast. But they didn't. And equally, Senegal would probably have had a better chance of attention if they had submitted their horror movie, Salou, which has a little bit of international profile. It is currently available on Shudder.com and is pretty good. But it is a horror film, so it wasn't submitted. And for certain countries, you have to play a game of whose country is it anyway. Because with the current globalization of cinema, sometimes it's difficult to tell who to submit, when to submit, which country should do it. And there were two good examples this year. We had the Korean film Broker, which is directed by the Oscar-nominated Japanese director Hirokazu Koreeda. And we had the award-winning Italian film Eight Mountains, which was directed by the Oscar-nominated Belgian director Felix van Groningen. So who submits those films? And let's face it, given their mutual history, Korea was never going to submit a film directed by a Japanese director, particularly when they had an award-winning film of their own in Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave. And because it is the governments of these countries, or at least a committee approved by the governments, who submits these films, what happens when a filmmaker falls out with their country? Jafar Panahi has been struggling against the Iranian government for decades. He spent large stretches under house arrest. He's spent large stretches, including a significant portion of 2022, in jail for making movies. And yet the brave little bastard still makes films. And nowadays he makes films about the fact he is not allowed to make films, including this year's or 2022's film No Bears, which is very, very good, did the festival circuit, got widespread international acclaim, but because it was directed by Jafar Panahi, Iran was never going to submit it. And a slightly similar thing happened in China this year. Their film Return to Dust got international praise, international acclaim, but did spend large stretches of 2022 banned in its native China. It appears that the government took offence to certain aspects of the story and certain ways the government and government schemes were portrayed in its story of two rural farmers struggling mightily against the input of government schemes, both local and national. And the Chinese censors insisted that director Li Ruijun changed the end of the movie to give it a more positive spin. And I watched Return to Dust, and the end of the movie is quite awkward. It doesn't really fit, it jars. But that's the version that got released internationally, because that's the version that the Chinese government approved of. So yeah, Li Ruijun had issues with the Chinese censors. There was large stretches where this film was banned, and yet it was the Chinese film with the biggest international profile, and it wasn't submitted by China. And then you have the odd situation of countries that just don't submit a film at all. I mean, there were pretty big countries which just didn't submit a film, like South Africa didn't submit a film this year, Egypt didn't submit a film this year. Honestly, neither country had very, very good contenders. But a very strange case was Nigeria. Now, they had what seemed like a really strong contender, or at least for Nigerian cinema, a strong contender to be submitted. It was a film called Elishin Oba. It premiered at the Toronto Film Festival and also ended up on Netflix. And it is based on a play by the Nobel laureate Wole Soyinka. So, in terms of Nigerian cinema, this was a very, very high-profile film. Yet, the Nigerian Oscar committee met, and they refused to send a submission. Which meant the Academy took the unprecedented step of saying, look, we're going to give you an extra week, please reconsider. And once again, the Nigerian committee did not submit a film, despite the fact Elishin Oba, by all accounts, was a respectable submission. And then we also have the case of Laos. Now, Laos is a tiny country, and you wouldn't expect it to have a large film industry, and it doesn't. But it is one of those countries who has one filmmaker, a woman named Mati Do, who has produced a couple of films. The first one, Dearest Sister, was submitted by Laos, but her last one, The Long Walk, wasn't. Now, I have to be completely honest here, and I am not sure whether The Long Walk would have been eligible in this year's Oscar cycle or last year's Oscar cycle. Either way, Mati Do's The Long Walk was not submitted. And I think it should have been. I actually really, really liked The Long Walk. It's kind of a time-travelling, metaphysical ghost story. You can actually find it on Shudder.com if you have that. I really liked The Long Walk, and I think it should have been submitted to the Oscars. It wouldn't have got anywhere, but at least submit it. So sometimes countries just don't submit what you expect them to. And then you have the process of voting on it, and the long list, the 93 films in this case, gets whittled down to 15. And even then, you have issues occasionally. And there are films which are on the 93 film submission list which don't make the 15 film cut. And some of those films I think are well worth paying attention to. And in my personal opinion, I would have liked to see the Australian film You Won't Be Alone, the Bolivian film Utama, the Finnish film Girls, 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 the Israeli film Cinema Sabaya, which I think is excellent, and also the Jordanian film Faha. All of those films got submitted and none of them made the 15 film long list. And I did want to give a shout out to them in this Oscar preview. So those are some films which, for varying reasons, I won't be considering in the bulk of this video, but I did want to mention them. And with that said, let's get on with the films that actually got submitted for Best International Feature.
Best International Film. Nominee.
All Quiet on the Western Front has been winning absolutely everything in the international feature competitions at the major awards, including winning Best Film at the BAFTAs, which still baffles me. But in this year, where there is this one juggernaut, All Quiet on the Western Front, it did not win the Golden Globe for Best Non-English Language Film. That was this film, Argentina 1985. And this also won the Ibero-American Film Award at the Goya Awards, Spain's national Oscars. It competed at Venice and as various other things. So this is a film with a lot of momentum behind it. It's a film which was absolutely guaranteed to get nominated in this category when it was on the 15 film long list. And I don't get it. This is a very, very serviceable, even entertaining courtroom thriller. Most of this film takes place in the courtroom, where a group of lawyers is trying to bring to justice the military junta, which was in charge of Argentina up until 1985. So it also has a story about fighting back against fascism and a small group of dedicated people risking their lives, literally risking their lives, in order to do the right thing, in order to bring these dictators to justice. So there is some of that as well, and there is an awesome speech by the lead actor Ricardo Darín, the awesome Argentinian actor Ricardo Darín, at the end of the film, which is probably based on the real-life lawyer who he's playing. But that is a killer speech. But that's the only moment, for me personally anyway, that this film really, really shines. I mean, that one speech towards the end where he's laying out everything that has gone on before, and his repeated refrain is "Nunca más," never again. And that's stirring. And there is some devastating testimony from some of the people who were victims of the military junta. But it's a courtroom thriller. And even if you wanted to explore living under a fascist system, then I think the Argentinian film from, 12 years ago now, The Secrets in Their Eyes, is a much better example of that. Actually, also starring Ricardo Darín. But The Secrets in Their Eyes is a special film about this same subject, whereas Argentina 1985, in my opinion, is just a really, really good courtroom thriller with some interesting layers on top of it about the fight against fascism. I don't think this film is so outstanding, so special, that it deserves all the attention it's got. I preferred other films on the shortlist to this film. This wasn't one of my personal nominees. I cannot understand how it won the Golden Globe. I just don't think it's that type of film. I think this is a solid, thought-provoking, entertaining film. It's solid. I just don't think it's outstanding. For me, Argentina 1985 is a meh, and that's all it will be. And I don't think it deserved this Oscar nomination.
Best International Film. Nominee.
Jerzy Skolimowski is in his 80s now. He's been making critically acclaimed and award-winning films for over 50 years. he is one of the leading lights, or considered one of the leading lights, of European art house cinema. And I don't like his work. Admittedly, I don't have much experience of Jerzy Skolimowski as a director, but the few films I have seen of his, I haven't really liked, or at least not liked enough to consider them, best of the era or award-worthy or anything like that. And now he's made a film about a donkey. Now, admittedly, this is a film which is based on the 1960s French classic Au Hasard Balthazar by Robert Bresson, in which some children baptize a donkey, and then this donkey becomes an avatar for Christ. It's a Christ allegory in the form of a donkey. Or at least that's what Au Hasard Balthazar is. But that's one of the things that Robert Bresson was very interested in, is faith and religion and the abuses of that. And Jerzy Skolimowski is kind of remaking it, or at the very least being heavily, heavily inspired by Au Hasard Balthazar in his story about a donkey, Io, in which a donkey goes from a Polish circus all over Europe, eventually ends up all the way down into Sicily, and all along the way he suffers. This is a film, yes, about humanity's inhumanity towards animals, but also a film about humanity's inhumanity towards other men. There's basically nobody in this film who is good or likeable or just, with a couple of exceptions, but most of the people that this donkey meets are plain evil to other humans and to the donkey itself. I mean, this donkey nearly dies so many times in the course of this film. At one point, he's sold for meat. And the way that Skolimowski approaches this, I mean, it doesn't have the Christ allegory over it. It doesn't have the religious imagery that Bresson had in Au Hasard Balthazar. As far as I'm aware, I haven't actually watched it yet, but everything I've heard about it. It doesn't have the Christ allegory stuff, but it does have, eventually, what amounts to a vegetarian polemic. This is definitely a film with a vegetarian agenda. And yeah, that's not necessarily what I signed up for. And it's also been shot and produced in a very, very extravagant way. So many of the shots in this film are just covered in a red filter. I mean, there's one sequence in a forest which is just red. I mean, it's almost like a literal descent into hell. And yeah, I mean, that's weird. There's stuff from the donkey's point of view which doesn't quite work for me, particularly when, in my opinion, they anthropomorphize this donkey far, far too much. The first owner that this donkey has in the Polish circus is a young woman who uses the donkey in her act. I mean, I have no idea what the act is, but it's a family-friendly circus. But this woman uses the donkey in her act, and she loves this donkey. She clearly cares for and trusts this donkey and loves this donkey. And throughout the course of the film, the donkey has enough memory of this woman and enough nostalgia for this woman that it is constantly trying to get back to her and gets out of pretty good situations. I mean, there's a couple of times where it's a good situation. I mean, there's one place where the donkey is giving rides to little kids with special needs, and towards the end of the film, it ends up in a Sicilian villa with an Italian countess, played by Isabelle Huppert, of all people. And that would have been fine as well. But every time, it just leaves because it needs to find its original mistress. And I just don't believe that a donkey has that much memory, that much intelligence to want to do that. So, yeah, I just didn't buy this film. Ultimately, it's a film about a donkey. And that's all it is. I mean, I don't think there's enough metaphor. I don't think there's enough extra layers on this to make it worthwhile, particularly when it's been shot in such an extravagant way with all this use of red light. I mean, there's certain scenes where the film runs backwards. It's extravagant, and yeah, I just didn't get this. It's a film about a donkey, and I don't think it's a very good film about a donkey. So yeah, for me, EO is an A, which is an ironic statement. I mean, EO is an A, and I also don't think it deserved this Oscar nomination.
Best International Film. Nominee.
I really liked The Quiet Girl, and when it made it onto the 15 film long list for the International Feature Oscar, I was really hopeful that it would make it, and I did think it had a chance. Ultimately, it did surprise me that The Quiet Girl got nominated, and much more high-profile films from internationally renowned directors, like Bardo and Decision to Leave, didn't make it. But I'm really, really glad The Quiet Girl did. Because this is a subtle, understated film, which doesn't always work when it comes to awards like the Oscars, about a 12-ish-year-old girl in the early 80s in rural Ireland who is sent away for the summer to distant relatives. So she's simply out of the house because her mother's overwhelmed. She's just about to give birth to her 6th child, and she's just another mouth to feed. So this 12-year-old girl gets sent away, and for the first time has love, has attention, has a place of her own, and she starts thriving. But she doesn't belong here. She still has a family, and this is a temporary situation. So there's lots of stuff going on there, and the family she's gone to has, tragedies in their past. So there's lots of stuff going on here, and it's quiet, it's simple, it's got such a great sense of connection and community in it. This is a beautiful little film. I mean, the title of the film is apt. This little girl, played by the awesome 12-year-old actress Catherine Clinch, she has a sense about her. I mean, she doesn't talk a lot, but you can see how, for the first time, she's getting the love and attention she desperately craves. And it's really sweet to see her start coming out of her shell, but inevitably there must be a fall. And yeah, I was very, very impressed with the quiet subtlety of The Quiet Girl. It's a beautiful, somewhat melancholic film, but I think it's really, really sweet. And I like the fact that since it is an Oscar nominee, hopefully more people will actually seek it out, because it's a film which I think thoroughly deserves it. I mean, if you don't mind a film where 80% of the language is Gaelic, then do check out The Quiet Girl. I think it's excellent. I think it thoroughly deserves this Oscar nomination, and for me, The Quiet Girl is a yay.
Best International Film. Snubbed.
More often than not, the films that make it onto the 15 film long list for the International Feature Competition are films that people have been talking about for a while. They appeared at festivals, maybe even won awards at festivals, got international distribution, critics have been talking about them, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty easy to predict which of the films on the gigantic submission list is most likely to get on that 15 film long list. But sometimes strange ones sneak in, and you're thinking, really, that made it onto the list? And one of those films this year was the Moroccan submission, The Blue Caftan. And I have to say, when I saw The Blue Caftan on the 15 film long list, I was absolutely delighted, because I'd already seen it at a film festival, and I thought it was exceptional. It's the story of a man who is a marlam, a very specific type of tailor who handcrafts traditional caftans. And this man, played by the Palestinian actor Saleh Bakri, is running a small little shop with just him and his wife, played by the awesome Belgian-Moroccan actress Lubna Azabal. But him and his wife are in this little shop in a souk in a small town in Morocco. But Lubna Azabal is very sick, possibly terminally ill. And because Saleh Bakri has been looking after his wife for so long, he's really falling behind with his orders on these very intricate, very handcrafted caftans. So they hire an apprentice, a handsome young male apprentice, played by Ayab Missioui. And this handsome young man immediately starts vibing, starts connecting with the male tailor. And over the course of the film, it gradually emerges that Lubna Azabal has, for the 20 years of her marriage, been willfully ignorant of her husband's proclivities. She categorically does not want to know what Saleh Bakri gets up to at the local hammam, the local Turkish bath. But now, her husband, Saleh Bakri, is clearly vibing with this handsome young man, Ayab Missioui, and she's probably dying, and she wants her husband to be happy. So there's conflict here. I mean, Lubna Azabal is the most religious of these three people. She's the only one we regularly see praying. So she has issues with homosexuality, but she wants her husband to be happy. And this really complex and really intimate three-way relationship starts. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a love triangle, because pretty much everybody knows where they stand. Everybody knows what's going on. It's just, how do we deal with this? And in my opinion, the way they deal with this, the way these three people deal with it, is by a beautiful, all-encompassing portrayal of love. I think this is an outstanding film on the subject of love. All different types of love, all different levels of love. I mean, yes, obviously there's the physical, the sexual attraction, which Saleh Bakri and Ayab Missioui have. But there's also a level of companionship. There's a level of contentment that this very long-term married couple has. And at one point, Saleh Bakri has a beautiful speech talking about how much he needed to marry Lubna Azabal. I mean, yes, obviously, being homosexual in a country like Morocco, not the greatest idea, so it would be a good idea to get married. But Saleh Bakri makes the argument, and convincingly, in my opinion, makes the argument, that he needed Lubna Azabal at that point. And their love, while it doesn't have the spark, it doesn't have the passion of many marriages, it's still needed. It's still love. It's a different version of love. It's a different level of love. Even arguably, it's a stronger type of love. And seeing how this all plays out as Lubna Azabal gets more and more ill, and Saleh Bakri and Ayab Missioui get closer and closer together. For large stretches of the film, all three of them are living in the same apartment. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful film. The Blue Caftan is one of those films that, even though it did make it onto the 15 film long list, you very, very easily could overlook it. But I urge you not to, because I think this is a beautiful, poetic, profound film about love. I think it's really, really good. And I was delighted when it made it onto the 15 film long list. And in my personal opinion, I think it deserved a nomination in the Best International Feature category. And for me, The Blue Caftan from Morocco is a yay.
Best International Film. Snubbed.
Corsage is a film which premiered at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival and got some attention when Vicky Krieps won the Best Actress in the Un Certain Regard section of the festival. And as such, it was not a surprise when Corsage made it all the way to the 15 film long list for International Feature Oscar, and Vicky Krieps had some buzz around her as Best Actress. And in my opinion, both of those nominations should have been made. I think Corsage is an excellent film, which tells a highly fictionalised story of the life of the Empress Sisi of Austro-Hungary in the late 19th century. This is a woman who is just turned 40, has been renowned throughout Europe for her great beauty, her long red hair, but that's all she ever is. She's an image. She is a woman who has ideas, but she's not allowed to share her ideas. She is specifically told several times, "You are just there to look pretty. I, the Emperor, your husband," who, by the way, is having affairs with much younger women, "I'm the one who makes all the decisions. You just sit there looking pretty." So this is a story about this very beautiful, very capable woman being absolutely stifled by expectations of royalty in the late 19th century. And this is absolutely Vicky Krieps' film. This is a brilliant portrayal of that kind of frustration and anger and despair. Quite apart from anything else, I think this is a really, really good portrayal of depression. This is a woman who is stifled by her circumstances, and it is severely affecting her mental health. And Vicky Krieps plays it exceptionally well. I mean, I've always been impressed with her ever since I first saw her in The Phantom Thread. I thought she was excellent in that. Everything else I've seen her in, she's been brilliant in. And this is an excellent performance. And I genuinely think it's Oscar-worthy in the Best Actress category. And the film itself, I mean, it was presented, I mean, the publicity said this was an extravagant and outlandish, a postmodern approach to this historical figure. And it's not really that. However, the end of this film is 100% not historically accurate. So writer-director Marie Kreutzer did change things around and made it a very different film by having this lack of emphasis towards the end of the film. So it is a little bit outlandish, outrageous, postmodern, but really I think this is an acting showcase for Vicky Krieps, who is excellent and I do think is Oscar-worthy. And I also think that Corsage should have got a nomination in the Best International Feature category. So yes, for both of those categories, it's one of my personal nominees, and I do say that Corsage and the performance of Vicky Krieps are both yays.
Best International Film. Snubbed.
This category is all about world cinema. And there are still certain subjects and certain attitudes which are acceptable in the English-speaking world, but are still not acceptable in other parts of the world. And when a film gets banned in its native country for its queer content, that's often a mark, oh, we need to pay attention to this, let's see what's going on here. I mean, a few years back we had the Kenyan lesbian drama Rafiki, which got banned in its native country, and this year we had the Pakistani film Joyland, which was the first Pakistani film to ever compete at the Cannes Film Festival and did indeed win a couple of awards, including the Queer Palm. But despite this international profile, it got banned in its native Pakistan. Eventually, the Prime Minister got involved and it got unbanned, except in the region of Pakistan where the film is actually set. In Punjab, at time of recording, Joyland is still banned, and this film is set in Lahore in Punjab. As a young man finds himself attracted to and starting to have an affair with a trans woman. Now, I was lucky enough to attend an in-person Q&A with the writer-director of this film, Saeem Sadiq, and he, to some degree, rejected the idea that this was a quote-unquote trans movie. Instead, he called it a queer movie. And I kind of agree with him, because this is not a film which directly and specifically deals with the trans experience, even though there is a trans woman as one of the major characters. This is not a film like A Fantastic Woman, where we are specifically dealing with the ins and outs of being a trans woman. This is about the man. This is about the man finding something out about himself which perhaps he never knew before. On some level, he seems to be on the queer spectrum. I mean, where he falls, how he would self-describe, is debatable, but he definitely finds himself strongly attracted to this trans woman. And what does that mean? How do you deal with that, particularly when you've got a long-suffering and seemingly loving wife back at home? This is a film also about the patriarchy, because this man feels enormous pressure from his very, very conservative father. I mean, you must be married, you must have a son. Your wife, who is perfectly happy working at a beauty salon, now you are in work, now she can come home and look after the children and maybe even get pregnant herself. And this is a film about being absolutely stifled, absolutely throttled by the patriarchy. And that is something that Saeem Sadiq constantly came back to in this Q&A. And he's right. I mean, this is definitely a film about the patriarchy. I mean, there's so much going on here. Yes, I would say this is a queer film, but it's also definitely a film about the patriarchy, and definitely a film about living in a very conservative society like Pakistan. This is an outstanding piece of work. I understand why it won those awards at Cannes. I kind of understand why it's still banned in the city in which it's set. But I think it's an excellent film, and I do think it deserved this Oscar nomination. So yeah, it is one of my personal Oscar nominations. And for me, Joyland is a yay.
Best International Film will win.
It's often the case that an international feature, not in the English language, makes it all the way to a nomination for Best Picture. And therefore it is blindingly obvious what is going to win Best International Feature. This has happened over recent years with the Japanese film Drive My Car, the Korean film Parasite, which of course won Best Picture as well, and also the Mexican film Roma. And this year, that honour goes to this German film All Quiet on the Western Front. So it was blindingly obvious what would win the international feature competition even before, astonishingly, this film won the BAFTA, not only for Best Film not in the English language, but also Best Film. What? Because I'm on record as saying that I am not the hugest fan of All Quiet on the Western Front. Yes, it is an emotionally powerful film, but in my opinion, Edward Berger over-directs the film. I think it's too stylised for its own good. Yes, it has the emotional power. Very good acting. I think Felix Camera, the leading actor, is excellent, and I'm going to give him an honourable mention as Best Actor. But I think what Edward Berger has done with this 2022 version of All Quiet on the Western Front is turned one of the greatest anti-war novels, and arguably also one of the greatest anti-war films, the Oscar-winning 1930 version of All Quiet on the Western Front. He's turned that project into just another war movie. Or at least that's how I felt about it. I mean, I understand why people have connected with it. I understand why people are going to praise this, and it is going to win Best International Feature, but it just didn't grab me. I'm sorry, it didn't. And there are other international features which I will be talking about in both Best Picture and Best International Feature. It just doesn't do it for me. So yeah, I don't think it should have got nominated in any of the 3 above the line categories it got in Best International Feature, Best Feature, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Didn't make the cut of any of my personal nominees. But in each case, I mean, it's a good film. I just didn't love it the way that most people do. So, All Quiet on the Western Front in Best Picture, Best International Feature, and Best Adapted Screenplay. It's just a meh.
Best International Film should win.
The non-English language film that everybody is paying attention to and everybody is heaping praise upon is All Quiet on the Western Front, which is going to win Best International Feature. I mean, there's just not a contest. The non-English language film that everybody should be paying attention to is the Belgian film Close. This is a film directed by Lucas de Hont, whose first film, Girl, also got a lot of international attention. But honestly, I wasn't the hugest fan. Well, I really, really liked Girl until the last few scenes. The final idea that Girl leaves you with, I strongly object to. But he was definitely a director to watch. And then he came out with this film, Close, which follows the story of 2 teenage boys who are transitioning between junior school and senior school. They have grown up together as close as brothers, they're neighbours on a flower farm. Or I think, or at least one of them owns a flower farm in the French-speaking part of Belgium. And they not only spend the night at each other's house, it's not uncommon to spend entire weekends at the other's house, even sharing the same bed. But when a half curious and half teasing question comes up from one of the girls in their class, are you together? One of the boys, brilliantly played by Eden Dambreen, rejects this idea wholeheartedly and separates himself from his best friend, joins the local ice hockey team, starts hanging out with the boys who play football and discussing endlessly who's better, Kylian Mbappe or Lionel Messi, and completely rejecting his old friend simply because of the suggestion that they might be intimate with each other. And this has consequences, and the end of this film does have its very melancholy moments. And all of this is brilliantly executed by Lucas de Hont. As both director and screenwriter, he manages to fill this film with such subtlety, with such grace. In a year where so much of the discussion, so many of the films have been this maximalist approach, here we have a quiet, intimate film which is so much about body language, so much about silence, but we see everything going on. And honestly, I think Lucas de Hont deserves Oscar nominations in both the Best Director and the Best Original Screenplay categories. I think this is an exceptional piece of work. And Eden Dambreen, this kid, is so impressive. I mean, he was 15 years old or so when he shot this film. And I was just blown away by how good he was. And if you watch more of these videos, you will be hearing more about Eden Dambreen. But yeah, Lucas de Hont as director, as writer, I think deserves Oscar nominations. I think this should win the International Feature Oscar this year, and I also think it should be nominated for Best Picture. I really do think this is the type of film that needs to be more in the discussion when it comes to a Best Picture win. So yeah, for me, Close deserves a boatload of extra Oscar nominations, and it's definitely a yeah. In the Best International Feature category, the actual nominees are All Quiet on the Western Front from Germany, Argentina 1985 from Argentina, Close from Belgium, EO from Poland, and The Quiet Girl from Ireland. My personal list of nominees would be The Blue Caftan from Morocco, Close from Belgium, Corsage from Austria, Joyland from Pakistan, and The Quiet Girl from Ireland. What is going to win this category is All Quiet on the Western Front from Germany. But my choice for this category is Close from Belgium, which I think is the international feature that everybody should have been paying attention to this year. And as I leave you with some honourable mentions in this category, which I think are worthy of note, a reminder that I have several more videos in this playlist which analyse different categories at the 2023 Oscars. You can check those out if you desire, even though if you watch enough of them you will have to skip some pieces of footage that I reused, including this closing statement. I am planning to do a reaction video to the Oscars themselves. I haven't quite figured out the technicals of that, but we'll have to see how that goes. And if you appreciate the kinds of things that I'm doing, I have an audio podcast, and I have various other things on this channel that you might want to check out. So you can like, comment, subscribe if you wish. And basically that's all I have for this particular video. So I'll see you next time, where I shine a light on cinema, both obvious and obscure.